All right, how's it going, everyone? So this is the glaciers part of the class, so lab 9 overall. I'll start by saying, so I'm not here this week. I'm going on a field trip with one of my classes, and I'll be back next week. So if you're in my section, you can either go to the Tuesday lab or the Wednesday night lab. If you have questions at all, but I'll make this video available as well. So hopefully that can help you. Okay. So this lab is looking at 3 different types of ice. It's mostly going to be looking at glaciers, but the first part's going to also touch on lake ice and sea ice. So starting off, it's going to give you a bunch of pictures, starting with lake ice. And this first one is under plain light, so we're just looking from above it, and it's just shining plain light on it, so you don't really see much. And then the second one is called polarized light, which is filtered light, which kind of helps see individual crystals of geologists usually do this for rocks, but we can do it with ice too. And you can see it already has like different colors. We can see more of the shapes in the ice under polarized light versus just plain light. And then this last picture is a side view. So the top is called snow ice, which is from like rain and whatnot, different precipitation. And then the more smooth stuff from like 5 centimeters down to 20 centimeters is just standard lake ice that froze the normal way. And then the next part looks at sea ice, same thing. These first 2 pictures are just a top view of it. The first one under plain light, and then sea ice 2 is a polarized light. And we can see all these like little crystals in here. We can actually see some differences there. And we can also see visible air bubbles and inclusions, which kind of form when like salt filled in, and this wouldn't have crystallized. So that's the big difference between like lake ice and sea ice is salt content, of course. And then this last funky picture is called a thin section. So it's like a really small slip of ice that we can kind of look at under microscopes. And when we put this polarized light on it, it kind of creates these cool colors with these jagged shapes, depending on the crystal type of the ice. And then the last part for part 1 is glacier ice. So same deal. The first 2 are just going to be top views with plain light, and then the second one's going to be polarized light, and we can still see some air bubbles and inclusions in here. And then the last one is looking at a thin section that's 5 centimeters long. So part 2 gets into a lot of glacier terminology. So if you haven't went through the lecture slides, I would recommend it for this lab because it's pretty heavy, and you're going to need to know some of it to be able to answer some of the questions. So one element of glaciers is these ogives, which kind of just helps show glacier flow. So ice at the center of these ogives are going to move faster than the sides, which we see this kind of curving pattern to it, which means they start off straight and then they'll kind of buckle. And it looks like flowing water to me, like it's flowing this way, but obviously a little slower since this is a solid. So one of the questions is going to be about counting these ogives to get at their speed, because it will form like roughly 1 of these crevices a year. So another element of glaciers are these crevasses, which are going to be helpful for the last part of the lab, but I'll introduce the terminology here. These crevasses are cracks that form when the glacier is moving pretty quickly. So there's 3 main types. There's shear crevasses, which form along the sides of glaciers, typically at these 45-degree angles, but they might be kind of hard to see sometimes, but they tend to form on the sides. Transverse crevasses form in areas where the glacier is moving really quickly, and they form perpendicular to the actual glacier flow. So this black arrow is pointing in the direction of glacier flow here, and these crevasses are perpendicular to that. And then these splaying crevasses are the last part we're going to look at in this lab, which tend to form these nice fan shapes. Typically where the glacier is starting to slow down. So they tend to form near the end, or what we call the terminus of glaciers. So another big element of this lab is going to be looking at topographic maps, which is a pretty cool way of trying to take something that's 3D, like a mountain or something, and squishing it down onto a 2D plane. So each line, we call that a contour, is assigned an elevation. So we can take these like flat things and kind of picture like, all right, there's like mountains here and then it's dropping down, and because it's easier to kind of work with paper than it is to like 3D print something. So some of the parts in this lab are going to be, let me see, like looking for like mountains and mountain height and different glacier difference glacier height. So oh, this does not want to get bigger. Okay, well, we can see all these little different contour lines. Anywhere where there's mountains, it tends to show you the max elevation. Otherwise, they tend to split them up every 1,000 or so. Come on, Sam. And then another little trick for them is when they're very dense like this, that tends to be elevation that's climbing really, really fast, versus where it's more spaced out, that tends to be more like straight, flat land. Okay. Yep, so this is the C6 line, which can be used for questions 8 through 16. And I showed it quickly on the Canvas page, but it asks where Mount Hayes is. It's pretty much like right in the middle there, and we can get the contour height from that. And then we also want Mount Scarland, which is kind of the upper left here. Same thing, we can get the elevation right off of that as well from the contours. And then I'll introduce a little bit of terminology for question 14. It's asking about the altitude of the equilibrium line on the Hayes Glacier. So let's see if I can kind of point out the Hayes Glacier. Here's the Hayes Glacier here, right? And then we see all the different lines there. So this equilibrium line is this balance between accumulation and ablation. So that tends to be where either it's a straight line between crevasses that are curving, that or they kind of stop altogether. So it's not going to be exact. I'll probably have to take a range of answers for it because it's not like the most used thing, but it kind of gives an idea where that kind of balances between the accumulation and ablation of glaciers. And then question 16 is using these ogives to determine the glacier speed. So the way I would do this is I would count up each ogive, so each like line that we see here. And they represent roughly every line is a year. And then we can use the scale bar in the lower right. It's pretty small. And then that's in miles. So the way I did it, I just got like a ruler and held it up to my screen. And on my screen here, roughly 3 centimeters is a mile. And then I just held it up to this red line that I put to say like, okay, what is that length of all of the ogives together? And so that would be it in miles. And then we'd have to convert miles to meters because that's what the question asks for. And I just like went online and did a miles to meters conversion, since that's a awkward conversion, and just got it that way. And I got and then you would take that length that you found in meters and you would divide that out by the number of ogives, and it will give you the speed of the glacier. So some of the next question asks about the next map, the B5 topo map, asking about the Eureka Glacier, which is right here. Question 20 is asking about the average gradient over its length, which we can find by first finding the length of the glacier in miles. So we'd have to use the scale bar at the bottom, the same way we would have just done for the ogives, measure out the whole length of the glacier, and that would be question 18. And then we can find the difference in elevation, which we'd have to use the contours for that. And you'd go to the 2 ends of the glacier, and they should be the tallest and the shortest. And then that difference would be that elevation, right? So then we would want to take the full length divided by that elevation, and then that would give us the average gradient. Question 14 is asking about the Black Rapids Glacier, which is at the top here. And it has similar questions about like, what's the gradient, what's the elevation difference. So we can do that the same way using the same scale bar. And then I already went through this slide, but I just threw it up again because the last part of the lab is asking about crevasses and asking about what different types that we see. So hopefully this can help with that. Okay.